Norm was a self-taught chemist with a high school degree who loved trying to come up with new things to make life easier. Working in the aerospace industry, Norm and a few friends had started a fledgling company to develop rust prevention materials for big rockets. The key was water displacement, and Norm tried formulation after formulation. Finally, on the 40th try, it worked. Norm's rocket-building clients loved it. In fact, so did their employees. When no one was looking, they would regularly sneak cans of it home. Norm thought maybe they should sell it to everyday people, and that's what they did. Norm hired salespeople who ended up selling cases of it to hardware and sporting goods stores right out of the backs of their cars. Today, Norm's formulation is essentially unchanged and very popular for all things around the house, and it's still named after what it does and how it was developed. Water displacement, perfected on the 40th try. WD-40.
All right, welcome to another episode of Your Business Unleashed podcast. We got a really neat guest on today, Glenn Suart from Today's Great Idea. Welcome, Glenn.
Hey, Clayton, how are you?
I'm awesome. It was so great to have heard one of your stories just then. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Clayton, I'm a management consultant, love doing business plans and stuff. And it occurred to me, I could advertise, but why not, give content to radio stations when then people call me. And so I've done about 300 of these stories. And the one you just heard there about Norm and WD-40 is a great one because it's in 90 seconds. I tell a story about an everyday person, just like you or I, who took some action with their idea and turned it into a business brand or invention that we know. And by doing that, you get people motivated thinking about doing great ideas or taking action, which is what you want.
Yeah, right on. Well, it's great to have you on today. And I've listened to quite a few of the stories, and frankly, they're not hard to get through. They're 90 seconds, which is really nice. And I first heard you on QR Calgary on 770 AM. And I think you've got a pretty good footprint around the country. And we're going to talk about all that. I want to talk about how you decided to take the plunge. And what's your story? What's your 90-second story? And where did this come from for you? And how did you get into this?
Well, that's a really good one, Clayton. I have a physics degree, and I found I didn't really like physics all that much.
Physics degree. You went pretty far for something you don't really like.
I know. And it was like, you want to do this the rest of my life? I don't think so. So I'd done university radio and loved media and went back to school and got an MBA at.
Where was that? Where was the university?
In Ivy School of Business in London, Ontario.
Okay.
And it was fun. It was a painful 2 years, really intense.
Okay.
And left there all set to move across the country for a marketing job when I suddenly got this great offer in Ottawa to do media entertainment consulting. And this was the mid 90s, and it was the perfect time. Specialty television was coming up and a few other things were coming out. The internet wasn't around yet in a big way.
Yeah.
And so basically, we were a small little firm when I got hired there, and we wrote the book on how to write a specialty television license application, like a Much Music or a TSN, et cetera. And I love writing stories about and trying to create businesses or telling the story about creating businesses in a totally new universe. There was no cable was just exploding at that point. So how do you create a business that's viable in this kind of space? So we were involved. Yeah, we were involved in lots of them. And we did such a good job that PricewaterhouseCoopers bought our firm.
Wow.
To be in the media entertainment consulting arm. And that was fun, except we suddenly lost a lot of our fun clients because they couldn't afford our rates anymore.
Yeah.
And then PwC moved me out here, in 2000 to go after Shaw and Telus and other clients. And then there was that whole Enron Anderson debacle of, got to get rid of your consulting. Yeah. So at that point, PwC, sold off their consulting side to IBM, and they didn't need strategy guys like me. I was the last guy to go here in Calgary, and got a great package. And it's like, what do I like doing? I like helping people tell their stories when it comes to business. And that's what I've been doing now for 22 years or whatever, 21 years.
Right on. Yeah, I mean it's pretty unique to hear the stories about every cool company or every neat product that we use. Chances are there's a really neat story behind it. And yeah,
exactly. It's like I figured, I listened to radio because I'd been involved in it for 5 years back in the 80s there.
mm-hmm.
And there was a guy in the US called Paul Harvey who did this 5 minute long bit. He was a new ABC newscaster, but he did this thing called The Rest of the Story, where he would tell people over 5 minutes about a guy or a girl and all the things that had happened to them. And then at the end, he would drop the bomb, which is, this is some famous person that you would know. And he delivered it with such panache and he wrote it so well. But then he passed away and nobody sort of picked that up. And one day I was living we were on vacation in Prince Edward Island. And I woke up and I thought to myself, why doesn't someone do what Paul Harvey had done? And it occurred to me, well, like most entrepreneurs, if nobody else is doing it, maybe I'll do it. And so it took me another 3 years to get it right before I pitched it to, a chorus, and then the rest is good. So
yeah, right on. It's super interesting because I couldn't find you on LinkedIn. Are you on LinkedIn?
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. Okay, I got to go have another look then. Your website's brilliant, but you don't really advertise in the traditional sense. You're probably not trying to get your SEO numbers up, and you're not out there doing all the typical digital marketing stuff. Your success has literally come from storytelling, right? And I imagine, and we're going to talk about this. So now let's go back to 2000, 2001.
Yeah,
you're at PwC, you're an employee, and that's where, when they put you out, they picked up your firm. So were you an owner at that point when PwC?
I had a very small piece. Yeah.
A very small piece. Okay. So that was your first sort of pseudo taste of entrepreneurism, but the real magic started to happen when
I got fired.
When you got fired. When you got fired.
Yeah.
That's another great podcast. That's another guest that we had on, Mike at Bloggity. He has a podcast called You're Fired or something like that.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's about that pivotal moment, that shift.
Because you wait for stuff. That's Clayton. That's exactly right. You wait for stuff. I'll get to it next week or next month when I have a bit more time. When suddenly, you're without a job or, and I say I got fired, but, I just got let go because of the purchase.
Sure.
It was like a year. I got a year's severance and it was great because it gave me a chance. I was not as stressed as I would normally would be, of course.
Sure.
To sort of reinvent myself. And every day I find, though, especially in this world, I'm reinventing myself now because sometimes the radio stuff works and sometimes it doesn't. You end up with some great clients. Other clients, it doesn't work out so well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the few episodes that I've listened to and the one that we just heard, those are all pretty big brands. Do you focus in on your podcast on sort of smaller, lesser known success stories?
No, and that's a good question. But no. And the reason is because this is how I framed it when I started. I could have gone out there, as you were saying, and I could advertise. I'm a business plan consultant, a strategic management consultant, and I could pay for advertising. But I wanted to figure out a way of getting other people to pay me for my advertising, and also get the benefit of it. And so that's why I hooked onto the storytelling idea. And the way it works, though, is I'm giving content that's good quality to the radio stations, which they can then sell and market.
Okay.
And so that works for me because, but the payoff for the radio listener is you've got to know what this brand or this business or invention is. So if I do a story about Joe's Plumbing, where it might be a great local entrepreneurial story, nobody might know it. So therefore it's not relevant to my podcast. Yeah. Everything has to be something that you would be it's sort of like the old water cooler thing. Like you'd be going, "Oh, I didn't know that. Did you know that?" Like you start to share that, and
Yeah.
I get a lot of people calling me who actually have never heard the radio thing, but one of their friends has said, "Call Glenn because he helps." People they've heard it. The friend has heard it and told them to call me.
Cool. Yeah, and I guess that's sort of everything you've just said. The way you structure the podcast is there's sort of a punchline at the end of every one where you go, "Oh, okay, right." There's a
That's
hook at the end that keeps you coming back, right? I want to hear
yeah,
another one now, right? And
yeah,
I
because
yeah,
that's right. It becomes appointment stuff, Clayton. If I told you off the top that it's about McDonald's, you might not be interested.
yeah,
But everyone, it becomes appointment listening because people go, I know I'm going to hear a story about something that I know, and I'm going to get a payoff at the end, as you said, with the hook.
yeah. Well, and I think that it's super interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with, and I'm sure that you work with and have helped, their own individual stories are so cool and they're so neat. And they could be told in a super interesting light. It's just, it wouldn't be as relatable to the broad public, obviously, but the story would be just as neat. And that's really the story of entrepreneurialism, right? You can't go to a business school, you can't go to Ivy and generally learn how to build a business. All the best success stories come from places where you never would have expected it to come from, right?
Yeah.
And occasionally I guess there's a factory made or a factory system sort of industrial success, but I for the most part, all of the really cool success stories that I read a lot of business books on people's journeys and cool brands that I like and
Yeah.
how they came to be, and it's all not what you'd expect. And that's really the story of entrepreneurialism, right? We're just all fighting it out here. And the story that we tell often can lead to our success, right? So,
Oh, yeah. It's about, I think you put it nicely there. It's about taking action.
yeah,
You don't know where things are going to go. And many of the stories I did are exactly that. Like the one with Norm there, he didn't know that there was going to be a consumer application for this stuff. He thought it was just for rockets.
yeah,
That's what's compelling, is that when something magical happens and you don't just say, oh, it's that be curious. Why is that? And then see what happens.
yeah,
But you got to take action. You can, contemplate your navel until the cows come home. Nothing's going to happen. You've got to try something and do it, obviously, carefully.
yeah.
You don't want to go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so I guess that's a nice lead into what you do. So we haven't really talked about what you do other than this fabulous podcast radio show, 90-second stories. You're on your website, right on the homepage, is you say that. What's stopping you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What's stopping you? Is it we all suffer analysis paralysis? Let's dream and scheme until the cows come home, but there's actually no action. And the biggest success stories are the ones who moved. They get moving and they move faster. And so when I see what's stopping you on your homepage, I get the idea that you're the person that just pushes people over the cliff. And this is what I'm paying you to do, and map that out, right? And make it a bit more palatable and a bit more easy to take that plunge, because it's terrifying, isn't it?
It is. It is. And so you get somebody, we handhold a lot, right? We help people because they're not good. They might be good at one thing. They might have figured out this great widget, or they might know about marketing, but they know that they're weak in other areas. So we can help them figure out what they're weak at and strengthen those areas, and then help them, build what they need. Like a lot of people need a business plan.
Okay.
Right? They need a roadmap as to where to go, because it saves time, money, and stress. But a lot of people never do it. They just get so fixated on this widget that they forget the other elements, just thinking that other stuff is going to magically happen. And I had a guy, 2 weeks ago, great guy. He spent 3 years with his other friends working on this particular business to business thing, and it's a great thing. I like it very much. But I said to him, after we had a conversation, I talked to him about it. I said, okay, what about this competitor in Europe? And he looked at me like, what? And he didn't realize this competitor from Europe was coming in, and they hadn't really looked at their business plan for 2 years. So they were just unaware. And so it's that kind of independence and support in a collaborative way that we bring to the table.
Interesting. In a business plan, it's funny because I don't know if you know this, but I host a 3 to 5 club here in Calgary. Yep. It's sort of a CEO mastermind. And we're just in the middle of, in November, every year we cover our 2-page strategic plan. And I start out the session talking about how different that is than a business plan. And, you do your business plan to get some nice ideas together, and you give it to the bank and maybe get some financing, and then you stick it up on the shelf with the other shelf help books. And, and so is there something different about how you approach business plans than, because really, I've seen a lot of 40, 60-page documents that are there to tell a story. They're there to tell your, similar ideas, what you're doing, but it's to tell a story to a bank to get financing. And as Mike Tyson says, every fighter has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So, or punched in the mouth.
Well, you're absolutely. It's your audience. If your audience is the bank, you write it a certain way for a certain thing. But there's also other audiences. There's your investors. There are your employees who are coming along on the ride for this, that they want to know where we're going.
Yeah, we call them stakeholders.
Yeah, very much so. So, sometimes when you've seen, and a lot of business plans are not well written. And I don't mean that mine are the most fantastic. Mine are okay, or good. But the key things you got to do in a business plan are keep it clear and keep it concise. Your business plan could be 2 pages. Yeah. It depends on what it is and where you're going, because you want to communicate your idea. And when you throw a 40-page or 60-page thing like you're talking about in front of somebody, they're not going to read it, especially when the paragraphs are blocked paragraphs and they're hard to read. And what you need to do is, again, not surprising, add some storytelling to it. Not that this becomes a novel, like, a Harry Potter novel, but you want it to be readable so that a great plan could be read by anybody. You could give it to your mother, and she could read the plan and go, oh, I get it. I see what they're doing. It's logical, it's factual, and it's fun to read without being superfluous.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would be a few, in terms of business planning? Because I think, we also talk about projections and operating strategy, which we'll get to.
Yep.
But in terms of business plans, how is the best way to, what is the best way to approach a business plan? Where should I start?
Well, the easiest thing is, if you can't do it yourself, and a lot of people struggle with that because of where to get started, is your point.
Yeah.
The easiest thing is to bring somebody in, and it could be an investor, it could be a consultant like me. Have them talk to them about what it is you see, and then have them write it down, bullet point style, nothing fancy, and then get that written document back and then iterate it. That's the easiest way, because once you see what you said on paper, you start to go, oh, I like that. Oh, there's a hole over here. You've got something to react to, because right now it's all in your brain at the end of the day.
Yeah. I like a Simon Sinek sort of approach too, right? Like you got to begin with where you want to be, right? And I think that's maybe one of the biggest challenges that I consistently see owners have is, I'm really great at making back scratchers, but the business of the back scratching business is that's a whole other thing. My back scratchers are the best back scratchers around, but the actual business of it, I don't know how to handle that. I'm a crafts person, right? And so, and so we talk a lot about, well, why is it that you're doing this? Well, I want to make some money. Well, money's not a very inspiring vision, is it? And one of my mentors, Chuck Blakeman, talks about the random hope strategy in business, right? We're going to work really, really hard and hope it all works out. And it's maybe we should just be a bit more intentional about things here, right? You get what you intend, not what you hope for. Another Blakeman quote, right? So, I like this idea of getting help making a professional or at least, a guiding business plan, right?
It's like, just write down your roadmap. Where are you going? It's
Yeah.
really important to then expose it to the light. A lot of
Yeah.
people will have it in their plan, think, as you just talked about a little bit, they think it's going to work, but they don't really expose it to others. And by having it written down, it makes it easier to say, oh, well, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Or that's a great idea. How can we add to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Back to the what it is that you do. I noticed on your website that you separate out smart business plans from realistic projections. And by the way, I like the descriptors smart and realistic, because those are two things that are often missing from business plans. And so why isn't a projection part of a business plan? Why are those two things separate?
Well, it's a great question, Clayton. I find that one of the best places to start when I talk to somebody about their business is the numbers. And when you go through the numbers with somebody and do the projections to try to figure out where they're going, their projections could be way off. But you bring out all the elements of the business plan in that when you're going through the numbers. So by getting the realistic projections in the first place, you know if you've got a business or not. And there's no point writing the business plan until you got some numbers. Yeah. So that's why we sort of start actually with the projections first and then write the document after, because it's much easier.
Yeah.
And you must see that. You must see that a lot.
Oh, well, yeah. And you go, hey, would you like to engage in a budgeting exercise so we can map out your next year? And they go, well, what, I don't need to pay you for that. You go, okay. Well, what do you want out of next year? Well, I'd like to make 50 grand more than I made this year personally, and you go, great. That's a perfect starting point. Let's reverse engineer that. That's a projection. And now we can install a budget. And, if we take it down to the operational level, I can program that budget into your accounting software, and we can run an actual to budget variance analysis every month. And now you can actually start to see where you need to make some adjustments. And, I love the idea of, again, you're starting with the end in mind. You're going, okay, at the end of next year, I would like to have this result, whatever that is, right?
Yep.
And in the broader scheme, in our 2-page strategic plan that we do in 3 to 5, you go, okay, well, why do you want to be there at the end of next year? Well, because it's going to put me an inch closer to my ultimate vision of whatever my ultimate vision is. Ours is at Aiken Henderson's to help entrepreneurs and business leaders build great companies. And so everything that we do is pointing us towards that. And this business plan that you're talking about, the smart business plan and a realistic projection, those are just things to point you at that, right?
Yeah. No, what you're doing, Clayton, is exactly right. Like you're helping people the way they should be helped, even though they don't understand it themselves.
Well, and I think that's part of what you're doing as well. When we talk about, what you said early on is really, you nail it. You go, maybe I'm good at making back scratchers. I'm not good at making business plans. So let's go and get some help, right? Maybe you don't need to be an expert at making business plans, because there's resources out there that can take that off your plate or at least guide you on the way. And I think all this stuff, frankly, probably comes down to a level of confidence where you're going, I'm about to jump off a cliff here. Yep. Right. Let's make sure there's some water at the bottom of it, that I can, some nice refreshing water at the bottom of it rather than a road. You know what I mean? We don't need to be the road runner here.
This is it. Like, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And you asked the question off the top, sort of like why, you're doing the radio, but you're not doing so much on, online advertising. You're absolutely right. I don't do Facebook. I don't really do much on LinkedIn besides have a small presence up till now, because I didn't want to do a shitty job and I have not been focused well. So to your point, I'm going to be hopefully working with our mutual friend, Derek, because, I know that what I've got and he's good at is content strategist marketing, and I've got content. How do we get that content out through these other channels? Because I can't rely on radio stations only at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because you get certain audiences and stuff. So that's what we're going to work on for. So I'm about to go through a dynamic change in my business because, I've got the content. but I'm going to be reaching new markets this way, and I've got a plan for that. So I've been reworking a plan. I've been thinking about bringing a partner in to do stuff like so. Just thinking about those things when you're forced to look at it on paper, you go, oh, and defend it. It's very important.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
Yeah. 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 It's the same thing as when you're actually in it, seeing your accounting and seeing how, wow, you spent a lot of money last quarter that you weren't expecting to spend. It's like here's some reality for you, right?
Yeah.
And then the last pillar that's on your page, we talked about, okay, we got the smart business plan figured out. We've got realistic projections figured out. And now you're going to help with a clever operating strategy. And I imagine you're really focusing people back on their stories when you're doing that. But tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So obviously, what I like to do is help people with, figure out and get into business. And then, of course, you get into business. It's like, well, there's a lot of other things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis to run an operation. Yeah. And I learn that all the time. So I had a guy reach out to me 3.5 years ago, just before the pandemic, and he had an idea for a consumer product to bring it into the country. And I said to him, like, okay, why is anybody going to want this? Because there's lots of competitors in this space. And he gave me 3 great reasons. And I was like, wow, those are really good reasons. And he was also a very good salesman. And so we started the business, brought in stuff. We sold to, Canadian Tire, lots and lots of product, and did a great job. But then Canadian Tire figured out that they could do it better than we could. And so they decided they don't want they blacklisted us, and we had to find other markets for it. And we're still doing stuff. But the point I'm getting to is that you have to go from a strategy on paper to operations. And so that's what we helped with. We helped figure out, okay, what do we need to do next? Who do we bring in? How do we do that to build up this enterprise cost effectively? Because it's easy to spend money, right? How do you grow the business and the support for the operations? And we made a lot of mistakes as a group, but you learn from these things. And so the business is fine. It's surviving, but it's not what it could be at this point. So we're trying something else. Your point, though, is operations are different, and you need to bring in, again, the right operations people. Like, I don't know logistics, but I know a guy who knows logistics really, really well. And so having him on board, terrific. If you need a guy or a girl who can do technical strategy and who does it for, Suncor and other companies, you can bring those people in. The best, like you talked about it, it's bring in the right people at the right time, but do it in a cost-effective way.
Well, and you go, well, I can't afford these people, right? That's a common, I can't afford to subcontract out my bookkeeping and hire a fractional CFO. And usually what's happening there is a person hasn't got their story figured out. The ones who are really, really confident in their product and have their story figured out and have focused on the fundamentals and believe that when they jump off that cliff, that it's going to work out. But the only way they've gotten that belief is because their headspace is right and their story is correct, or they're not correct necessarily, but they have a story that they're shooting towards, and they're very, very focused. Those people don't have trouble bringing in external help, right?
No, those companies that are moving forward generally know that they have to bring in the help. You can limp along. You don't have to bring in the help. You can limp along, but if you don't do it, you're not going to go anywhere. And for me personally, just like I was talking about with the outbound or inbound marketing for my content, like I've limped along for whatever it is throughout this whole internet phase without doing very much, and I'm not happy that I've done such a shitty job that way.
But you've also helped others. It's funny that you say that, because shouldn't you have been drinking your own Kool-Aid a little bit?
Yeah.
But because you've created some great success stories, right? So
yeah, absolutely. But it's the cobbler's children, right? You do everything for other people, and you're the last guy.
Yeah. I file my personal tax returns at about 11:59 on April 30th every year, by the way. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. So it's like it's exactly that. You I've seen it enough that the ones that do move forward are the ones who carefully invest in bringing in the right people. Don't spend crazy amounts of money. I tell people that, you do not want to end up like some of those people on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den
Yeah.
who've mortgaged the house and have got a half-baked product. You got to know what the good stuff is. And that means you got to be able to have a product or service, number one, that people want to buy. And two, you got to be able to sell it. A lot of people can't sell it. And if you can't do that, then don't go crazy spending money. But if you're good at selling, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if you should be you should maybe pitch Shark's Tank on doing some Shark's Tank prep for the folks that are about to come on.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
There's some good stories on that show.
Oh, there's fantastic stories. And it's a show about entertainment, and they package it extremely well.
Yeah.
Because you see these people, it's just like, American Idol or these other shows too, where they package the story about the person. So you're feeling rah behind them. You want them to succeed. But sometimes these things there's no chance in hell. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. So just coming back to this operating strategy, like, do you roll up your sleeves and get real tactile and operational?
I've done that. I think it's important to do so. I love more the strategy side, so I focus there, but I have jumped in. I was just, for the last couple of years been doing on the consumer products thing, day-to-day operations as well. We didn't need to have a full-time team. We had a great logistics person, great marketing person, and a great salesperson. So the four of us, worked every day to get these consumer products, not just, over from overseas, brought them in, got them out the door, made sure the clients were happy, designed new ones. You got to get your hands dirty because I don't want to just be somebody who said, oh, this is what I learned from other people. I've actually lived it. So I know, oh yeah, you make sure you pay your taxes on time. You do, okay, these are the things you've got. You can't ignore this, or this. WCB, don't even touch that one. Make sure that's paid and you're dealt with it, right?
It's expected CRA is going to go to 10% interest next quarter. So,
oh my God,
on top of all that, it's one of the highest lending rates.
Yeah, of course. It's a crazy thing, and there are lots of great businesses out there, but the one thing I'd say, Clayton, is after all our conversation, is that you got to know what business you really are in and what problems you're solving. Because a lot of people who've got a great widget think they're solving one problem, but they're not really solving the right problem, if you know what I mean.
Interesting. That's part of the story that you uncover.
Yeah. So, for example, just a little highlight story that I like telling about people is that, I had a major police organization hire me because they wanted to tell their story better. They needed a $50 million training center, and they had this beautiful plan. They would show it to government, and the government would throw it in the waste paper basket because they'd say, we don't have the money. And this went on and on and on. It's just round and round. And I said to them, okay, well, your problem is you're asking for a $50 million training center. And they go, well, yeah, that's what we need. I said, yeah, but that's your problem. That's not the government's problem. So we changed the title of the business plan to meeting acute mandatory training challenges while mitigating exploding occupational health and safety liability, which of course government is responsible for. Yeah. And suddenly they were much more interested in the plan.
Just change the title.
Yeah.
Change the story.
Yeah. So understand whose problem you're solving is very important. I solved the radio station's problem by creating content that they're interested in, that's valuable, that they can sell. So I'm solving somebody else's problem, but I'm helping myself at the time.
Right on, Glenn. Okay, well, let's do a quick top three here. A quick top three, and then I'll let you get back to your day.
Sounds good.
Top three things that an entrepreneur needs to consider when they're getting started. You can have a minute.
uh, I like the fact is be realistic. Um, that you understand. Don't get in the analysis paralysis like you've talked about,
Yeah.
but make sure you understand what you're really getting into. Number one. Number two, don't do it alone, because you need a partner or partners to do stuff with, to bounce things off of, and if you can do that, it's critical to success. When I've seen people succeed, it's because there's more than one person involved. There's the rare person who's got all the things in one basket, but you can never have all the skill sets. And when you're doing it together, you naturally do some of the things you need to do better. And number three is, um, you know, do a projection, a realistic one of what it's going to take financially to do this, and then double it. Because, yeah, because you have, you, you never, there's so many unexpected things, and you need to know how much money this is going to take at the end of the day. And it could be daunting. Like you think about that, I was just reading about that, new, round stadium in Las Vegas.
Oh my gosh. Did you hear what tickets
$2 billion.
You know what tickets are worth?
Well, this is exactly what I'm saying. $2 billion to make this building. So, with so many events and so many seats, how much it's got to break even, pay for the interest and all that stuff. Well, that's why the prices are so high. But people are going because it's an event. So they've done the calculations to say, yeah, we could probably make this work. But that's a big gamble, right?
That's a big gamble.
Yeah, and but even if you're going to invest in a website, $5,000, $10,000, what do you got to make back, in terms of selling stuff to make this worthwhile? I had a person the other day had an idea for some drinkware that they were bringing into the country, and they were selling it online, and they were trying to figure out, okay, well, let's just do it on Facebook. And it's like, well, if you're only selling one at a time, you're going to sell a lot to make it in, to shipment, all this, it just it didn't make any sense, especially in such a competitive environment. But this drinkware was also ideal for event catering companies and promotional companies, where, of course, they would buy in bulk. So I sort of steered them in that way. And we're going to find out next week how well they've done.
Cool. Right on. Well, thank you so much, Glenn Suart, for joining us on today's episode of Your Business Unleashed. Glenn, where do I find you if I want to chat with you about my business?
Happy to talk to people at area code 403-669-6739, today'sgreatidea.com or writemyplan.com, WRITEMYPLAN.com.
Thanks so much, Clayton. Glenn. I really appreciate it.
Clayton, this has been a great conversation. Thank you.